you're about to step into some pretty intense shoes here. Leading a platoon, it's a whole different ballgame. It's not just knowing how to handle your rifle, it's about making decisions when everything's on the line. And that's where this whole ADP 390 thing comes in. We're going deep on this one, but not just to throw jargon around, but how these principles can actually, help you when it really counts.
Absolutely.
Have you ever, doubted yourself, wondering if you've got what it takes to lead?
It's something every leader grapples with, especially starting out. But the key thing is leadership, at its core, is understanding the big picture, operating within your lane. Let's break that down a bit.
Let's unpack that totally. I'll admit sometimes I get lost in the weeds of platoon movements, fire team formations. It's easy to lose sight of the bigger picture. So how do I, as a platoon leader, bridge that gap?
Think of it like this. You're a chef, right? Busy kitchen. You're focused on perfecting that one dish. But you always know it's part of a larger menu, the whole dining experience. Your actions as a platoon leader, even at the tactical level, they directly impact those strategic objectives.
Okay, I think I see what you're saying. But those strategic objectives, they feel a million miles away sometimes. Can you give me a real world example?
Yeah, for sure. Say you're tasked with securing a key bridge. Sounds simple, tactical objective,
That's it.
but that bridge could be the lifeline for a larger force, getting supplies through, maybe even evacuating civilians. Your platoon's success there, it has a ripple effect.
Wow, okay. So even though I'm focused on my platoon, those small wins, those setbacks, they all feed into something much bigger. Each engagement is like a piece of a puzzle.
Exactly. And ADP 390 gets into that. It talks about warfare operating on those different levels, strategic, operational, tactical. As a platoon leader, you're at that tactical level, the tip of the spear, but you're never really disconnected from the bigger picture.
Right, right. But ADP 390 also talks about this difference between engagements and battles, which honestly, I use those terms interchangeably sometimes. What's the distinction? And why is it so important for a platoon leader to really get that?
Big difference. Engagements, that's your bread and butter as a platoon leader. Those immediate, messy clashes, the firefights, patrols making contact, that's where your decisions have that direct impact. Battles, on the other hand, are those larger scale things, multiple units, battalions, brigades, all mixed up.
So, a battle is the chessboard, and the engagements are the moves we make to win the game.
Perfect analogy. You're focused on winning your engagements, but those contribute to the larger battle. And that's where mastering the art and science of tactics comes in.
Art, again, we talked about this earlier a bit, but it seems, I don't know, a little abstract when I think about, maneuvers and weapon systems.
It's understandable to feel that way.
Yeah.
When we say science of tactics, we're talking about the measurable stuff. Weapons, communication protocols, formations, the tools, right? But the art, that's where it gets interesting.
You've definitely got my attention. What does that art look like for, say, a platoon leader in the field?
It's about developing that sixth sense, that gut feeling. When the plan falls apart, which it always does, it's about flexibility, adapting, knowing that no two engagements are the same.
So not just memorizing the manual, but knowing how to improvise. It reminds me of something I read in here about a platoon pinned down taking heavy fire. Their lieutenant realized the textbook flanking maneuver, it wouldn't work. So he used the terrain, a dry creek bed, moved his squad unseen, flanked the enemy from a totally unexpected direction. Gutsy call, probably not in the manual, but it won the day.
Exactly. That's the art of tactics. There's no one right answer. Every situation is unique, and a huge part of that is the human element.
We're not dealing with robots out there, that's for sure. So how do you factor that in for your troops and the enemy?
Understanding that fear, stress, fatigue, they all play a part. They impact decision-making. A soldier pushed to their limit might hesitate. A terrified enemy might fight harder than you expect.
It's about anticipating those human reactions.
Exactly. Your job as a leader is to prepare your soldiers for that. And that preparation, that's where the science of tactics comes back in.
Knowing your weapon systems, your formations, that's got to be a huge confidence booster for your soldiers, right?
Absolutely. That mastery of the fundamentals, it breeds confidence. And confidence, well, that lets you act decisively when things get hairy. But it's not enough to just know the science. It's about applying it under pressure.
Right, because no firefight ever goes exactly by the book. So how do you, as a platoon leader, how do you bridge that gap between theory and the real deal.
Well, there's no substitute for experience, of course.
Yeah.
But you can start building that bridge now. Talk to those who've been there, those seasoned leaders. Ask them about their experiences, the
Yeah.
decisions they made when it mattered. Read up on historical battles. And I'm not just talking about the big picture stuff, but those smaller engagements, those platoon-level actions where quick thinking made all the difference.
Soak up those lessons learned, the good and the bad.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of running through scenarios. Sand tables, map exercises, even video games. Put yourself in those what-if situations.
So you're not caught flat-footed when they actually happen. Speaking of what if, ADP 390 talks about analyzing the battlefield using MTTC, mission, enemy, terrain and weather, troops and support available, time available, and civil considerations. But I gotta say, it sometimes feels more like a checklist I'm supposed to memorize than something I can actually use.
I get that it's easy to fall into that trap, but think of MPTC more like a lens you use to size up every situation, a way to make decisions on the fly.
Okay, so walk me through it. How would I actually use MPTTC, in the field to make a call?
Let's say you're on patrol. Your mission is to recon a suspected enemy position. You're in thick jungle, visibility is lousy. That's your terrain influencing your approach right there. You've got your squad, standard gear, no heavy weapon support. That's troops and support available. You figure it'll take 2 hours to get to the objective before nightfall. That's your time constraint.
Okay, I see how all those factors are already shaping things.
Exactly. Now, you get intel, the enemy has more firepower than you thought, changes your assessment of the enemy situation, and then the weather goes south. Rain, heavy rain, movement slowed, you can barely see, and the risk of being spotted just went way up.
Things just got real fast.
That's MEPTTC for you, always in flux. So you're constantly reassessing. Do you push forward knowing the enemy's packing more heat than you expected?
Sounds super risky.
It is, which is where your judgment comes in. Maybe you pull back, call for backup, or find a safer route. The key is METTC helps you analyze, weigh those risks, make the best decision with what you know.
So MPTC isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions, constantly adapting.
Exactly. And with more experience, that MTTC's assessment, it becomes almost second nature. But that instinct is built on knowing your stuff, and a big part of that is understanding your combat power.
In combat power at the platoon level, it's more than just firepower.
You got it. Remember those 8 elements: leadership, information, command and control, movement and maneuver, intelligence, fires, sustainment, and protection. As a platoon leader, your ability to leverage those elements, that's how you amplify your combat power.
Okay, so break it down for me. How does a platoon leader actually use something like, say, information as a weapon?
Information is key on the battlefield. Think about it. Every little bit of intel you get on the enemy, their location, strength, movements, morale even, it all gives you an advantage. And that flow of information goes both ways. How well you communicate with your platoon, with higher command, that can be the difference between mission success and, well, not so much.
So it's not just about giving orders, it's about everyone being in the loop.
Exactly. And that ties right into command and control. Maintaining order, even in the chaos of a firefight, that's how your platoon moves and reacts as one unit.
And being able to move, to maneuver, well, that's where those tactical formations we talk about come into play, right?
You got it. Knowing how to use terrain, how to position your squads, maximize firepower, minimize risk, crucial stuff.
It's about putting your soldiers in the best possible position to succeed, but also to come home safe.
And we can't forget about intelligence. Now, you might not have a dedicated intel team at your level, but you're always gathering information.
Yeah.
Patrol debriefs, enemy activity reports, even something as small as noticing the locals acting differently. It all adds up.
It's like piecing together a puzzle bit by bit.
Right. Now, when we talk fires at the platoon level, we're talking about your squad's firepower, their ability to hit what they're aiming at when it matters.
And knowing when to hold fire, that's just as important, yeah.
100%. Every shot you take gives away your position.
So it's about controlled aggression, knowing when to unleash and when to hold back.
Exactly. Sustainment, now that might seem like something handled higher up, but for you, it's making sure your soldiers have what they need. Water, ammo, medical supplies. A platoon that runs dry, they're in trouble, no matter how good their leader is.
And that leads into protection. That's more than just body armor and helmets, right?
Right. Protection is about minimizing risk. Using terrain for cover, setting up good fields of fire, always being aware of what's around you. It's about making sure your soldiers can fight, but also that they can survive.
So it's all about evaluating risk, trying to minimize it, which seems to be a big theme in ADP 390. In fact, it actually calls RIG a constant companion. And I have to say, That's a tough one to swallow. It seems like in the military, we're always trying to mitigate risk, reduce casualties, but this almost makes it sound like risk is something we need to, embrace.
It's not about being reckless, but understanding that you can't completely get rid of risk, but you can learn to take calculated risks.
Okay, help me out here. What does that look like on the ground?
It starts by accepting that you'll never have perfect information. Things change quickly. Remember those MTTTC factors?
Right, like trying to hit a moving target in a sandstorm. So instead of freezing up, how do I get better at managing risk?
It's about weighing what you stand to gain versus what you could lose, and making the best call with what you know. ADP 390 talks about some ways to reduce risk without getting stuck.
Like what can I actually do to minimize risk without second-guessing myself at every turn?
Well, it emphasizes security, for one. Making sure your platoon is well protected, that's huge. But it also talks about staying flexible, being able to adapt. Remember that lieutenant using the creek bed for cover. That's a perfect example.
So being agile makes sense. The faster you adjust, the better you handle those curveballs.
Right. ADP 390 is big on agility, being able to react faster than the enemy.
How does a platoon leader, how do they build that agility, not just for themselves, but for their whole platoon?
It comes from training, from communicating clearly, building a team that can almost read each other's minds. That shared understanding of the mission, the enemy, the terrain, each other. The more you work as one, the faster you can react.
So it's not just about me knowing my stuff, it's about making sure my whole platoon is on the same page, tactically speaking.
That's right. And that's a huge responsibility. You're responsible for their training, their readiness, their lives.
No pressure, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it makes sense. The more everyone understands the big picture, the better they can handle those chaotic situations that pop up. And a big part of that is knowing when to act fast and when to gather more intel. I bet that's a tough balancing act.
You're telling me. How do you know when it's time to move, even with limited information? That's the million-dollar question, right? Where's that line?
It is, and there's no easy answer. But think of it this way. You're leading a patrol. You spot an enemy patrol. They're heading your way. You could hold back, watch them, try to figure out how many there are, what they're up to. But while you wait, they're getting closer, maybe getting ready to ambush you.
So sometimes hitting them first, even without all the intel, that's the better move.
It can be. Sometimes speed is your best weapon. You strike first, you disrupt their plan, maybe gain the upper hand.
But other times, holding back, getting more intel, that's the smarter play.
Absolutely. Let's say you're planning to hit an enemy outpost. You've got a good lay of the land, you know their strength, their defenses. But then right before you move out, your scouts report a bunch of activity. Vehicles coming and going, radio chatters way up, time to rethink things.
Because charging in with old intel, that's asking for trouble.
Exactly. Waiting, getting more info, even if it means delaying the attack, could save lives. Might even lead to a bigger win in the end.
So it always comes back to that assessment, that awareness of what's going on around you.
And that's where the art of tactics, it really shines. It's about reading the battlefield, trusting your gut, making those split-second decisions.
A lot of it seems like instinct. How does a new platoon leader, someone without years of experience, how do they even start to develop that?
It's a process. Every exercise, every training scenario, even reading about those historical battles, it all helps build that tactical sense. Find good mentors, ask questions, and don't be afraid to screw up in training. That's how you learn.
So learn from the wins and the losses.
Exactly. And never stop learning. Never stop looking for new angles. The moment you think you know it all, that's when you become predictable. And on the battlefield, predictable can get you killed.
This has been amazing, really eye-opening. So as I get ready to take command, how should I think about all this ADP 390 stuff? What's the key takeaway here?
Don't just memorize it. Understand it. Why it matters, not just what it says. So when you're out there, facing the unknown, you're ready to make the call. Not just follow a script. Because no two situations are the same. You've got to adapt, think on your feet, lead your soldiers through the chaos.
Turn that knowledge into instinct.
Exactly. And remember, it's a journey. You don't have to have it all figured out on day one. Leadership, it's about growing. Constantly embrace that.
This deep dive has been, honestly, it's been more than I expected. It's like I have a roadmap now for how to actually use ADP 390.
And remember, your actions, even at the platoon level, they can have a huge impact. Don't ever underestimate that.
To all those future platoon leaders listening, we got this. Adapt, improvise, overcome.